On lesson 54, we're going to work on a couple of things. First, identifying relationships between days, months, years, decades, and centuries. Then we'll solve elapsed time problems using dates. And then we're going to use a number line and work with numbers to round to the nearest thousand. So first, just think, how many days are in a common year? Go ahead and answer that. There are 365 days in our typical year. And in a leap year, how many days do we have? So go ahead and answer that. You should have said we have 366 days in our leap years. Now think about every 10 years. What do we call that every 10 years? Starts with a D. You should have said decade. Think if you had 10 of those. So 10 times 10 is 100. And that would be a century. A century is every 100 years. How do you remember the days of the month? Like how many days are in 1 month? I have this saying that I use. 30 days past September, April, June, and November. All the rest have 31, except for February, with 28 days clear and 29 days each leap year. So that's saying that September, April, June, November all have that 30. If it's not mentioned, it has 31, except for February, which has 28 on a regular year and 29 on a leap year. So how many days does December have? Go ahead and answer that now. You should have said December has 31 days. Okay, we're going to look at a calendar. According to this calendar, May 10th, 2014 is what day of the week? So I'm going to find the 10th. Here's the 10th. And what day of the week is it? It starts with an S. Now I have to think, is it Saturday or is it Sunday? Well, here's Monday. I know before Monday is Sunday, so this S must be Saturday. Here's another question to think about. What is the first day of the week? So on this calendar and several calendars that we look at, what day of the week do we typically start our calendar on? So you should have said this day right here, which is Sunday. Most calendars start their weeks off with Sunday and they end with Saturday. So the two S's aren't actually next to each other there. Right, we're going to look at problems involving dates and elapsed time. The Pilgrims sailed to America and landed at Cape Cod in 1620. The colonies adopted the Declaration of Independence in 1776. Use this formula to find the difference between those two historic events. So our formula is we're taking something that happened later and subtracting from something that happened earlier. So this number, the later number, would be larger, so we put it on top, minus a smaller number that happened earlier, and we come up with a difference. And when we come up with a difference, that means that we are subtracting in the problem. So go ahead and find your dates. 1776 minus 1620. So 6 minus 0 is 6. 7 minus 2 is 5. 7 minus 6 is 1. So the difference in these two historic events were 156 years. We're going to look at rounding next. 7,836 tickets were sold for the first professional indoor soccer game of the season. Round the number of tickets sold to the nearest thousand. So first I'm going to write my number exactly how I read it, from left to right with commas. So 7,000, comma, 836. Now if I look at this on a number line, I have a 7 and an 8. So here's the 7,000s, here's 7,500, so the 8's even larger than that, and here's 8,000, but I'm not quite to 8,000. So I'm going to put my number somewhere in between, closer to the 8,000. And that's where it's at on my number line. So is this number closer to 8,000 or is it closer to 7,000? You should have said it's closest to 8,000. So they sold about 8,000 tickets. Let's look at another example. A special exhibit at a museum was seen by 34,186 visitors. To the nearest 1,000, how many visitors saw the exhibit? So go ahead and underline the number that is in the thousands, because that's what we're rounding in. You should have underlined the digit 4. I underline it and I draw an arrow to the right, because that's the number that I know I'm going to need to look at. That number is a 1. Does 1 tell us to round up or to stay there? We should have said 1 tells us to stay there. So I'm going to rewrite the digits I didn't use to the left, which would be 3. 4 tells me that I'm staying there. Put a comma. Everything else goes to a 0. So, about 34,000 visitors. This time we're going to work with the same number, but we're going to round it in 3 different ways: the thousands, hundreds, and tens. So rewrite the number. Underline the digit in the thousands. Should have underlined the 5. Draw an arrow next door. It's a 4. Does 4 tell us to round up or to stay there? It tells us to stay there. So I have 5,000, and everything else goes to a 0. We're going to look at the same number, 5,486, except this time underline the digit in the hundreds. If I do that, I underline the 4, draw an arrow next door, which is 8. 8 tells us to round up or down. You should say to yourself, round up. I'm not going to do anything with the 5, so I rewrite it. 4, we rounded up to 5. Then I have everything else goes to a 0. So when we round to the hundreds, this number is 5,500. Now let's round it to the nearest tens. Again, rewrite your number and underline the digit in the tens. You should underline the 8. Draw an arrow next door. Rewrite everything you don't use, so 5,400. Here we have 6. 6 tells me to round the 8 up. So 8 becomes a 9, everything else a 0. So when I round to the tens, my number is 5,490. Okay, this concludes lesson 54. Go ahead and try the practice problems and get them checked by me when you're done.